Since this is being aired in the evening, you will hear me make nighttime references, so I just want to make sure you know that. Okay. Good evening, and welcome to Turn South Dakota Purple's U.S. Senate Challengers Conversation. I'm Ngoc Thach, Communications Strategist for Turn South Dakota Purple, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Our mission at Turn South Dakota Purple is simple: to help South Dakotans become more informed voters by creating opportunities for thoughtful and respectful political conversations. We're grateful to have both Brian Bengs and Julian Beaudion for accepting our invitation to participate. Regardless of political affiliation, it takes a willingness to engage with ideas, answer difficult questions, and trust voters to make up their own minds. Our goal tonight isn't to declare a winner. It's to give both candidates equal opportunity to explain who they are, what they believe, and why they believe they've earned your vote. Let's begin with opening statements. By coin toss, we'll begin with Julian today, followed by Brian. Each candidate has 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. First off, thank you to Turn South Dakota Purple for hosting this event. Thank you to Ngoc for moderating this very important discussion today. And of course, thank you to the voters for actively participating and engaging in the process of politics. I served as a state trooper for 13 and a half years and then was named candidate for U.S. Marshal here in South Dakota. My name is Julian Beaudion, and I am proud to serve as the nominee for the United States Senate here in South Dakota. My life has been of service to the people in this state. I've been a nonprofit leader, of course, a small business owner, a really, really proud husband of a beautiful, remarkable, and strong woman, Inca in Sioux Falls, and a very proud girl dad of 3. If I'm smiling a little bit, it's because I miss my girls. But listen, this is who we are as South Dakotans. We're family members, we're neighbors, and my family is with your family. Just like many of you, we have to sit at our kitchen table and make tough decisions every single day, whether or not we're gonna pay one bill or the next bill, whether or not we're gonna get gas or have to buy medicine for the family. These are decisions that are incredibly difficult for every family out there. I look forward to talking through all of those issues that matter to South Dakotans most, and I know that my journey across this state while traveling and visiting 35 out of the 66 counties, having 28 town halls done, and visiting 5 out of the 9 tribal reservations will be very, very vital to the conversation today. I look forward to discussing these issues with Brian. And Brian, I also want to thank you for accepting this invitation to have the conversation. Thank you.
Brian.
Well, thank you, Ngoc, and thank you, Randy, for hosting this discussion, and thank you, Turn South Dakota Purple, for orchestrating this, and of course, Julian, for participating as well. Julian, thus far, I've avoided speaking negatively about you during the campaign. Although you've taken shots at me, I'm aware of that. I believe that you and I agree on the fundamental, most important issue, which is defeating Mike Rounds, that he should not go back to the Senate. With that said, I believe the only person who gains from us beating up on each other today is Mike Rounds. He's, of course, excused from explaining himself, apparently. I know Rounds' senior advisor, who has taken a dozen shots at me on social media, is watching today, so hi and welcome to you. Tell Mike I look forward to him cowboying up sometime and joining me on a debate stage. Anyway, my name is Brian Bengs. I'm South Dakota's independent candidate for the U.S. Senate. I grew up in a small farming community as part of a blue-collar union family, and my father was a National Guard First Sergeant. I couldn't afford college, so I enlisted in the Navy at the age of 17, and I served my enlistment assigned to an aircraft carrier. Afterwards, I used the GI Bill to attend college and then law school. I joined the Air Force JAG Corps, where I defended our constitutional system, serving as a military prosecutor, defense counsel, and ethics advisor who also taught the law of war. After 19 years, I retired as an Air Force lieutenant colonel. Since then, I've been a Northern State University criminal justice professor, the 2022 Democratic nominee for the United States Senate, long story there, and most recently a Wind Cave National Park ranger. When the Doge chainsaw came for the Park Service and so many other agencies, without any objective standards, I decided that I'd spent my whole life protecting the Constitution, and this would be my final call to duty. Regular South Dakotans don't have a voice in the Senate because big money owns our senators. I'm not taking a penny of corporate PAC money because we need to have a fight about the money corrupting our politics. I want to ban congressional stock trading, reopen the Epstein investigation, and make billionaires pay a higher tax rate than people who work for a living. We need more competition in our economy and the political system, so I support term limits and pledge to serve no more than 2 terms myself.
Thank you, Mr. Bengs. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly explain how today's conversation is structured. Each campaign was invited to submit 3 topics they felt were most important for South Dakotans to hear about. These topics were submitted independently and shared with the other campaign only after both had been received. For each candidate selected topic, the candidate who chose it will have 4 minutes to explain their position, followed by a 2-minute response from the other candidate. Our goal is simple: to give both candidates an equal opportunity to discuss the issues they believe matter most and to help South Dakotans make a more informed decision. Our first topic was selected by Brian Bengs' campaign. Brian, you've selected campaign finance and electability. Voters often hear that fundraising is a measure of a campaign's strength. What do you think fundraising does tell us about a campaign, and what do you think it doesn't tell us?
Okay, well, I would first highlight that although Mike Rounds is vulnerable, as a 2-term incumbent with $2.5 million in his bank account and the capacity to easily raise millions more from his big money donors, over the last decade, 82% of Senate candidates, 82% that outspent their opponents won the election. Unfortunately, that's true. Based on conversations with experienced political operatives in this state, we both, Julian and I, both know that it'll cost $6 to $10 million to win this race, unfortunately. I despise this system. I hate it. It is effectively auctioning off the government to the highest bidder. The ability to raise funds demonstrates a candidate's viability, though, in this system. According to Julian's last public FEC filing, he's raised a total of $153,000 in cash contributions. I'll be reporting later this month that I've raised over $780,000 since starting, with an average contribution of $29. Julian, according to the last public filing, has $3,000 in his campaign account and $14,000 in debt. I believe Julian and I are on the same side of the main issue, again, which is defeating Mike Rounds. Unfortunately, at this point, neither of us have enough money to be truly competitive. I know that. I assume he knows that. The big difference between us, though, is that I have a plan, and I have a demonstrated capacity to raise the money necessary to win. The stakes of this election, I would say, are higher than any election in my lifetime. The consequences of Mike Rounds being re-elected are catastrophic. He's voted for 3 corrupt Supreme Court justices, and he'll vote for at least 1 more. When South Dakota is 50th in teacher pay, he will finish his effort to abolish the Department of Education. He will continue to cut health care for everyday South Dakotans, and also billionaires can get another tax break. Julian, I believe that you owe South Dakotans an explanation on how you will turn it around and raise the millions necessary for a competitive Senate race when you've already relaunched your campaign in January and fundraising has only gone down from there. I will pass my
Mr.
time.
Beaudion, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, thank you. And first off, congratulations on raising a tremendous amount of money. It's an incredible feat, that's for sure. This campaign started off in April of last year. We were committed to running a grassroots campaign. We knew that fundraising in this economy with affordability issues would be difficult for people. I will say, and I'll point to this, is that 85% of all of the campaign finances that have come through Mr. Bengs' account are from out of state. And then over 90% of our donors are from in-state. That shows credibility and viability right here in South Dakota. Our donors are folks who care about the issues, as I mentioned earlier, that we've traveled the state and talked to people about. Again, this is a grassroots effort. And so when I travel this entire state, when I'm talking to people, nobody's asking me about how much money I raised last quarter. Nobody's asking about how much money I raised last night. What everybody is asking me is, hey, how are you going to correct this issue of affordability? How are you going to fight against Mike Rounds and his education platform while he is trying to dismantle the Federal Department of Education. People are asking me who's listening to them. And so again, I have served this state not just as a state trooper, not just as the nominee for the United States Senate, but my wife and I have served this entire state over the last decade, making sure that we're listening to people, making sure that we're traveling this entire state, hearing the voices of those who have long been forgotten, and shaping our policies based on what people tell us, not based on what I believe they want to hear.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our next topic was selected by Julian Beaudion's campaign. Julian, you've selected healthcare as one of your campaign's top priorities. What changes would you like to see at the federal level, and why should healthcare be a priority for South Dakota voters?
Yeah, I think healthcare has to be a priority, not just for South Dakota voters, but for our entire country, which is why I am for universal healthcare, and we will do what it takes to get it there, even if it means putting a public option in place. Universal health care takes care of so many things. It stabilizes Social Security. It makes sure that we will not have any cuts on Medicare and Medicaid, as Mike Rounds has voted to cut trillions of dollars from those programs already. I will promise you that I will not be voting for any further cuts. As a matter of fact, we will be making sure that we are reinvesting in our programs to get access for Medicaid, Medicare, and healthcare, accessible and affordable healthcare for everyone across this entire country. We also know that we have shortages across this state, right here impacting South Dakota. We have tons of rural hospitals and senior care centers closing in South Dakota. As a matter of fact, we're now down to one specialized OBGYN clinic in this entire state that's rural. That means that folks are traveling an hour and a half to sometimes 2 hours just for that specialized care. As a matter of fact, I went to the Rosebud Reservation here just a few weeks ago, and I spoke with the family who's really struggling because their clinic just closed down. They already had issues with affordability. They already had issues with access to healthcare, and now those issues are even greater because of the policies of Mike Round and this current presidential administration. So we have to make sure that we are reinvesting and making sure that these things are accessible and affordable, and the way to do that is through universal healthcare.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bengs, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Okay, well, I first want to go back and address something he said. My campaign has raised over $100,000 in South Dakota from over 1,000 contributions. My campaign has an average contribution of $29. I submitted 4,600 signatures to get on the ballot. You submitted 1,800. If you want to say that I don't have support in South Dakota, my contributors came from 50 counties. I've got support in South Dakota from the people. Now, on to healthcare. Last month, Julian posted on social media that he is the only candidate that supports expanding Medicare. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. I called for it in December last year. I published the Big Bengs healthcare plan on my Substack and on my website, laying out the healthcare proposal in great detail. I invite everyone to visit my website, bengsforsouthdakota.com, and read through everything that I have written on the topic. Even Mike Rounds has some healthcare material on his website, yet Julian still does not have anything for some reason. Americans pay the highest per capita healthcare costs of any wealthy nation in the world, and we get adequate results. Medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy, and we are stuck with a system very few people find actually affordable and accessible. Yet the American medical industry gives money to both Team Red and Team Blue to maintain the status quo. To fix healthcare in this country, we need to start with a plan. I propose building what already exists, extending the Affordable Care Act family plan eligibility from age 26 to 30, lowering Medicare eligibility from age 65 to 55, creating a Medicare public option allowing a buy-in that competes directly with private insurers on the ACA marketplace, extending the ACA subsidies until the public option comes online, and funding it with billionaires and corporations finally paying their fair share as they did in the 1970s. Before any of that, though, something has...
Thank you so much, Mr. Bengs. And thank you both for speaking to the important topic of healthcare there. Our next topic was selected by Brian Bengs' campaign. Brian, you've said polling suggests this race is more competitive than many people assume. What do you believe those numbers tell us, and what is your path to defeating Senator Mike Rounds?
Okay, the election is likely, again, to be the most important midterm election of my lifetime, at least. And if Mike Rounds is reelected, he will vote, as I've said before, for at least 2 more partisan Supreme Court justices, another round of billionaire tax cuts, and of course, massive cuts for healthcare. I've said it before, big money Mike Rounds is vulnerable, but only to the right challenger. Over the last 15 years, no South Dakota Democrat running for federal office has garnered more than 40% of the votes. I learned that the hard way in 2022, so I speak from experience. Mike Rounds' FEC report shows that he's been doing polling, but none of it is public. You can be certain that he would share it if the polling showed him in a strong commanding position. Julian hasn't released any polling telling South Dakota voters how he matches up against Rounds, and his FEC report doesn't show that he's done any. My polling is public. A highly rated national pollster says that I start down 4 points against Mike Rounds on the initial ballot, while Julian is down 25. In a 3-way ballot, I'm in second place, while Julian is in third. The viability of my path to unseating Mike Rounds is clear. I'm winning 25% of Republicans, winning independents by 30, and Democrats by nearly 50, with of course a lot of room to grow. These numbers are why Rounds' senior advisor has taken 12 shots at me over the last month on social media. It's not hard to understand why Mike Rounds does not want to face me in a head-to-head. Julian, of course, does not owe me anything, but he does owe you, South Dakota voters, an explanation on how he will defeat Mike Rounds, because hope is not a plan. To that end, Julian, do you have any polling data that you can share with your supporters today?
Well, I appreciate that question. No, I am not prepared to share any polling data. As a matter of fact, again, I give you kudos for being able to get a poll out. These polls are your polls. These polls are paid for your campaign, which means that these polls, of course, will be favorable to you. That's just a fraction. Polling is just a fraction of the voice of the people in South Dakota. While you have probably polled several hundred people in this state, I have spoken directly to thousands of South Dakotans and heard thousands of voices and heard thousands of stories of the people that matter most, which is South Dakotans. While you're busy doing polls and while you're busy spending money on outside sources, not in-state, I'm traveling this entire state. And what people are concerned about is not polls. People are concerned about affordability. People are concerned about health care. People are concerned about the amount of farmers that might lose their family-owned farms by the end of this year. As a matter of fact, I was in Britain, South Dakota, and spoke to an agriculture banker who said that nearly 40% of our family-owned farms will be filing for bankruptcy at the end of this year. Those are the things that matter to South Dakotans, not polls. And you talk about winning over Republican voters. I wonder if you've won those Republican voters by standing against birthright citizenship or standing in place of making sure that you're not going to caucus with either the Democrats or the Republicans, which gets you zero power if elected. Those are the things that South Dakotans are questioning.
Fantastic. Thank you both. Our next topic was selected by Julian Beaudion's campaign. Julian, immigration has become one of the defining national issues in recent years. What principles would guide your approach to immigration policy, and what role should the federal government play?
I think first and foremost, our government has a responsibility to all of our citizens and all of the residents in this country to make sure that we have strong and protected borders. That's a hard stop. Secondarily, I believe that immigration enforcement, should be done in a humane way. That means removing ICE directly from our neighborhoods. They have no place in our neighborhoods. They are there to protect our borders. We also need to make sure that we're looking at viable options for pathways to citizenship. That means protecting DACA recipients. That means making sure that our dreamers have also a quick and easy pathway to citizenship. I was doing a visit at one of the dairy farms here in South Dakota and learned of two stories. The first story is that one of their neighboring dairy farms completely closed. And it wasn't because their production was slow. It wasn't because they had issues with keeping up. It was because they didn't have the farmhands readily available to work. That's the only reason they closed. That's hurting South Dakota's economy. One of our largest economic drivers in this state is our agriculture business. The second story is just talking about the issues that we have with our visa program and how our visa program needs to be overhauled, completely overhauled, to make sure that families that are working on these farms and are working within agriculture has a safe haven, not just in this country, but in this very state that we call home in South Dakota. And so those dairy farmers who once were not willing to put their name out there to say, hey, we stand with an overhaul for immigration, are now willing to step out. They're now willing to come out in public because they know that this affects not just them, not just their families, but it affects families across our entire country.
Thank you. Mr. Bengs, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I got a lot to unpack here, but again, I have to loop back and say, Nikki Gromley has a pollster, the same pollster that I used in 2022. I assume you're not calling her naive for wanting better information about the state of the electorate and what they think about a variety of things. So we'll just move on from that. But I would also note that your flippant comment to the Coda TV news interview about polls that they're for strippers, I hope, and that's better than calling fake news, but I hope that's not the attitude that voters should be able to expect from you. Now, another thing that you mentioned before and slipped it in, birthright citizenship. As I wrote in a very detailed immigration position on my website last summer, I support birthright citizenship. So I was quite pleased to see the Supreme Court ruled correctly on this matter yesterday, although it should not have been anywhere near as close as it was. In that ruling, they affirmed that neither the President, the Congress, or a corrupted Supreme Court has the ability to unilaterally rewrite the Constitution. So the court, in essence, reinforced the foundation of the rule of law that we have in this country. To amend the Constitution, there's a specific process to follow, and that wasn't it. But anyway, we are auditioning for the spot in the world's greatest deliberative body. The role of immigration in this system is an important thing, and we should not be shy about having conversations about anything. Partisanship has trained too many people to avoid good faith debate on serious policy matters or face being canceled. Citizenship is distinct from immigration, but let me add that I am both pro-immigration and pro-immigration enforcement. With the lowest birth rate since the Great Depression, we need to increase legal immigration, to your point, with a comprehensive overhaul of the system. That hasn't been done since the 1980s. The independent conference is key to getting practical solutions to put the best interests of regular Americans ahead of the all-consuming red-blue war.
Thank you, Mr. Bengs. Our next topic was selected by Brian Bengs' campaign. Brian, you've selected your career experience and preparedness to hold federal office. Looking at your background, what experiences have best prepared you to serve in the United States Senate?
Okay, our country is experiencing corruption on a scale that we have not seen, Americans have not seen for over a century. There is chaos abroad, as neither our friends nor our foes can reliably predict the American actions in the rules-based international system that we created and have sustained since the end of World War II. We are currently bogged down in an illegal, unconstitutional war with Iran that has made them strategically stronger while it continues to harm our economy and that of the world. Our national debt relative to our gross domestic product is the highest level it's been since the end of World War II. Mike Rounds consistently refuses to fulfill his constitutional responsibilities and has sold his votes to big money donors. During his time as governor, major scandals such as Gear Up and Head Start resulted in the suicides of individuals, the main witnesses involved there, and very similar to the situation that occurred in the Jeffrey Epstein case. When Rounds got to the Senate, the national debt was $14 trillion. Now it's over $30 trillion. And a big reason for that is the two multi-trillion-dollar tax breaks for the ultra-rich that he has supported. Our Constitution assigns the Senate very key responsibilities for safeguarding the long-term national interests by counterbalancing the presidential foreign relations power with the advice and consent requirement for treaties and the power to declare war that is shared with the House of Representatives. The Senate confirmation requirement for presidential appointments of cabinet officials, federal judges, and military officers is another important power sharing arrangement. Finally, the Senate is a direct check on the abuse of executive and judicial authority, with each senator serving as a juror for any impeachment trial. As a former Navy sailor and retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, I've supported and defended the Constitution all over the world. I have practiced, taught, and published articles on international law, treaties, and the law of war, including one very relevant now, analyzing a potential U.S. attack on the Iranian nuclear program during a past period of heightened tensions. I've worked closely with our Asian and European allies. I ran NATO's individual legal education program at the NATO school, where I taught military operational law and traveled to guest lecture at multiple national military schools across Europe, to include Ukraine. In Japan, I was a State Department designated trial observer, ensuring an American citizen prosecuted in the Japanese criminal court received all the due process rights required by the treaty. Over my 2 decades in the Air Force JAG Corps, I've been a military prosecutor, military defense counsel, and a federal ethics advisor, and a supervising attorney. I'm admitted to practice law before the United States Supreme Court, as well as the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces and the U.S. Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals. I've advised military commanders at every rank on criminal law, on federal fiscal and contract law, on federal environmental law, on federal labor law, and federal administrative law. I taught Air Force Academy cadets and Northern State University students about our Constitution, its history, and different Supreme Court interpretive approaches. I look forward to educating Mike Rounds on the proper role of the U.S. military in matters of war and peace. I spent enough time doing court-martial jury selection and teaching criminal justice to understand that the impeachment process requires impartial jurors who will cast their vote based upon evidence presented, which is what I pledge to do in any trial. I grew up in a small farming community where I worked in corn and bean fields, so I understand how rural towns depend upon a healthy agricultural society. My father was a blue-collar union worker, so I understand tightening your belt and looking out for your neighbors. I think a senator ought to look out first and foremost for the regular folks who send him to Washington, rather than toe the national party line or cozy up to big money donors. Enough about what I think is important, though, Julian. I know you've got a strong background in public safety from your time on the Highway Patrol and as a community leader and small business owner. So please elaborate.
Thank you. 2 minutes.
Yeah, first off, excuse my reach, just thank you for your service. This incredible list of dedication to our country, and it's greatly appreciated, not just by me, but folks in our state. However, I do believe that in the United States Senate, we don't need another attorney. We don't need someone else who comes in with the mindset of a general. We need a public servant. And as you spoke to my credentials, that's exactly who I've been the entire time I've been in South Dakota. My family and I moved here 20 years ago. We took a risk and moved from one state to the next, and we were welcomed with open arms to this state, and we owe this state our service. We are in debt to this state for what it has been able to give us and provide us. And so my service of 13 and a half years as a state trooper is a gift back to this community, because this community deserves it. Serving as the nominee for U.S. Marshal means that I also had worked within the federal government and also on our reservations, understanding deeply the concerns of all folks across this particular state. South Dakota doesn't need another attorney, doesn't need another general. South Dakota needs a fighter. South Dakota needs someone with the courage to step up to this particular administration in office right now. South Dakota needs someone who has served this state. And I look forward to continuing to do that moving forward.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Brian. Those were the topics selected by each campaign. For the next portion of our conversation, we'll move to 2 questions developed by Turn South Dakota Purple based on recurring themes we've heard from South Dakota voters. These questions were designed to explore not only where each candidate stands on the issues, but also how they would approach governing if elected. Sorry about that. Okay, the first question. The U.S. Senate is built on coalition building, and regardless of who wins this race, you'll most certainly serve in the minority. If elected, how would you work with members of the other party to advance South Dakota's interests, and where do you believe common ground still exists? Mr. Bengs, we'll start with you, 3 minutes, and Mr. Beaudoin, you'll have 3 minutes to respond as well.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. We are bogged down in this red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. As an independent, I get asked repeatedly, so who are you going to caucus with? Because we're conditioned to go, you have to be on that team or this team. And I reject that. I reject it entirely. I am working in coordination with 5 other independent veterans who are running for the United States Senate from various other states. And we are going to be putting out, within the next week or so probably, a 13 governing principles document that will framework how we collectively and individually will work with others. And our whole idea is that the system itself is broken. And you can't really say, oh, if we only had more Team Red, if we only had more Team Blue, that the system would be repairing itself, because Team Red and Team Blue have been there forever and the system is broken with them on the watch. So the idea of the independent conference is that we just need a handful of independents who are not going to take orders from John Thune or Chuck Schumer, and I'm not going to. And that they're going to stand up and say, here's what we need to do. And we plan to deny the majority to either party. And in doing so, the parties will then face the choice of, hey, you can work together and nullify the power that we have, or you can come through us and we're going to have some conditions, such as, you know what, gerrymandering, that's kind of bad. You're screwing over voters. We shouldn't have that. So things like that will be the price of working with us. Do I have any problem working across the aisle? No. I've laid out on my website very clearly the principles and values, the South Dakota values, that I will take with me. And because I will not answer to either Chuck Schumer or John Thune, I will be answering directly to the voters. And I'm not taking, I think we need to have the big fight about money, so I'm not taking big corporate PAC money, again, because I want to answer directly to the voters. I should be working to do what's in the best interest of the voters, not engaging in the partisan warfare we have right now, which is why I think the independent model is the best thing going forward rather than another Team Red or Team Blue member.
Mr. Beaudoin, 3 minutes. Would you like me to repeat the question at all?
No, thank you. I think I'm all right. Listen, actions speak louder than words. And when we talk about the importance of coalition building, I greatly understand and appreciate how to build coalitions, because I've been doing so for the last decade. Again, my work across the state has been in coalition building, and I've taken that to this campaign. As a matter of fact, Brian talks about the 5 individuals across the country that he is working with, building a coalition, and how important that is. Again, actions speak louder than words for me, because I am part of a coalition called Take Back Congress, to where we have over 140 candidates from across this country running for U.S. Senate and U.S. House across 40 states that are ready on day one to introduce, propose, and pass legislation for all of those things that Brian just talked about. As a matter of fact, the 5 pillars that we stand firm on are ending Citizens United, which is taking big money directly out of politics, setting a code of ethics for the United States Supreme Court, which we know right now is running rampant. Setting term limits. We are committed to not running for any more than 2 Senate terms and 6 congressional terms. Setting a moratorium on lobbying, which we see right now that Dusty Johnson is going to go directly into a career of making himself rich on lobbying. And then, of course, last, banning stock trading, not just for those in Congress, but for the executive branch as well, to include the president and the vice president, because big money doesn't stop in Congress. It needs to stop right at the top with the president of the United States. That is how you hold folks accountable who are elected to what we want to see in representatives.
Thank you both. Turn South Dakota Purple topic number 2 and our last Turn South Dakota Purple topic. If South Dakotans elect you to United States Senate, what should they expect from you during your first 2 years in office? And what would success look like by the end of that first term? Julian, we'll start with you, 3 minutes, and Brian, you'll end with 3 minutes there as well.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I definitely want to do is I want to join the coalition on voting rights. We have to make sure that we're protecting our voting rights, and that includes making sure that the SAVE Act does not pass. Voting rights does not stop at just making sure that folks of color and communities of color have the right to continue to vote. It also means that women across our entire country have the right to continue to use their powerful voices as well. And so joining that coalition is going to be top on my list. In addition to that, as I spoke to in the previous answer, we've already started building these policies across our country to make sure that we are taking big money out of politics so that we do not have folks in office listening to donors, but instead listening to their voters. I will also make sure that I am continuing to travel across this entire state. Just because I've done 28 town halls so far as a candidate does not mean that I have the ability, or that I should have the ability, to stop after I'm elected. As a matter of fact, my responsibility to folks in this state should be to continue to listen and to make sure that our policies are reflective of the people of this state and evolve as the people also evolve. We have to remember that the promise of America is in our Constitution. And our Constitution is written so that we are consistently evolving in our policies. This state is no different. This race is no different. South Dakotans deserve specifics, not generalities. And that's exactly what I plan to do as soon as I get to the United States Senate.
Mr. Bengs, what can South Dakotans expect from you if elected?
Okay, well, I alluded to it before, obviously, with the independent conference. So we'll be going all in on that and trying to shift the power structure of the United States Senate. Again, from an organizational standpoint, our problems are structural more so than, hey, you're a bad person, you shouldn't be elected. We need to change how our organizations, our political system operates. The single biggest beneficiary of our dysfunctional structure is the big money. The big money that writes the checks to the donors. They own Mike Rounds, they own John Thune. That is causing so many of the other problems that we've talked about. If we can change things, and I've told people at town halls that I would be an advocate for open primaries. I wrote an op-ed about being an advocate for open primaries, allowing more competition. Our economy has the same problem as our political system for the same reasons. Too little competition, too much money. So addressing big money is the single biggest thing that we need to take on. Healthcare, of course. Everybody needs healthcare. We need to stop talking about it and just do something about it. Again, I encourage people to go check out my website and read my detailed plan that I published there. The national debt/deficit is a major issue. We are paying more for interest right now than we pay in national defense. And that was a policy choice made by Mike Rounds and people like him. We need to fix that by adjusting the tax code. So there's a myriad of issues, but as I said, the biggest issue is big money in our system. And we had this fight well over a century ago. 1907 was the first campaign finance law adopted in the United States. The senators from South Dakota were big supporters of that. And it prohibited, just flat prohibited, any corporate or banking interests to give money to federal candidates. You just couldn't take it. And it was, of course, immediately challenged in a free speech issue. And the Supreme Court ruled in 1916 that it's fine. You can do that. So we built a little structure to keep money from flowing into our system, because money's like water. So we built a roof over the years. But then we've let it atrophy. And once you get a small hole, then the water gets in and the rain and the money gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And so we have what we just had with the Supreme Court yesterday, allowing more money in after Citizens United. So we have to have this fight. And I've talked to thousands of South Dakotans. And literally every single person that I've spoken to says, big money controls our politicians. What are you going to do about it? So I'm going to have that fight. The single most important fight to have.
Thank you both. Now we are going to transition to one of our final question segments with one specific question for each candidate. We'll ask each candidate one question specific to your campaign. These questions address issues that have generated significant discussion among South Dakota voters throughout this race. The first question will go to you, Brian. You're running as an independent, and many voters have asked how that would translate into governing. Some have expressed concern that independent candidates often end up consistently voting with one party after taking office. You also triggered many voters with comments about ending birthright citizenship early on in your campaign. If elected, would you caucus with either party? More broadly, how would you ensure South Dakota has meaningful influence in committee assignments, legislation, and the day-to-day work of the Senate while maintaining your independence? And I know that you spoke to this quite a bit as well.
So I've addressed a lot of it. So there's a lot to unpack there. The big thing, obviously, is that running as an independent, we are all conditioned. Like, you're red, you're blue, you're red, you're blue. You got to be one of those two things because that's the system. It does not have to be the system. It doesn't. I'm part of the leading edge of independence. Nearly 47% of American registered voters are independent. They are rejecting the major parties. 27 and 27 nationally are the Team Red and Team Blue numbers. So people they just want it to work. I heard it countless times when I was doing my drive-thrus to get signatures. People would come up and say, can you just make it work? Because again, Team Red and Team Blue control the show right now, and they've controlled it forever. So we're just conditioned to accept that's how it's got to be. It doesn't have to be how it is. If we change the system, I spoke before about open primaries. Open primaries, if you have the top 4 individuals going to the general election, and I will note that this has been on the ballot in South Dakota, and both parties, Team Red and Team Blue, said, no, open primaries, that's bad. More competition, it's good for voters. If we had consensus choice voting in the general election, you could have up to 4 individuals, and the voters could decide in the general election. But of course, that is illegal. Our legislature prohibited that because competition bad. Now, we need to crack the system open. And if we expect Team Red or Team Blue to do it, I think we're fooling ourselves because they're just not going to. They've had ample opportunities to do so. We talk about the problems that we have. He's listed off a number of problems, and I agree. Those are serious problems, and we need to address them. But since 1976, 6 presidents from both parties have had a unified government where they had the House and the Senate and the presidency in the same party. And 2 of them, Jimmy Carter and Obama, for a period, had filibuster-proof supermajorities in the Senate. And yet we still have the same problems. The system is not being fixed. So the independent conference will be the answer. We will work with anyone. We just want to maximize competition for voters. The purpose that you said the organization Turn South Dakota Purple wants. I want the system to operate. I want the system to operate the way I was promised in grade school. Of and for and by the people. What we got right now is of and for by the parties and the big money donors. That ain't right, and it's not working, and nobody likes it. I want to change it. Thank you.
So we don't have a candidate opposition response slated for these, but I do have one minor follow-up here for you, Brian, and I can give you 60 seconds to answer it. But specifically, what spurred this question were a few comments we received from probably Democratic voters who were explicitly concerned about you being a John Fetterman if we should elect you. How do you feel about that, and what do you have to say to that?
Well, I will know that John Fetterman ran as a Democrat. Is he blindly loyal to Team Blue? He's not. I would say, I would invite everybody. I'm running on the principles and the positions that I've staked out on my website. I've written probably more, and I will say, I've written more substantive policy details on my website than any Senate candidate in the country. I invite you to go check them out. I'm running on the values I've listed there and the principles I've listed there. If you disagree with them, if you say those aren't my values, don't vote for me. but I think you're going to like them. I've told people when I talk to them, libertarians, Republicans, hardcore MAGA folks, Democrats, I guarantee you will find something you like on my website. And that's my position. I'm running into an open mind. Unlike the Team Red and Team Blue, I go into every question with an open mind, in accord with the values and the principles that I've listed on my website. If you can convince me that regular folks will be helped by doing something different, I'm on board.
Thank you for answering. Julian, I have one last question for you, and if you can tolerate answering this one more time or expanding on it. There has been considerable public discussion about whether Democratic and independent voters should unite behind a single challenger to Senator Mike Brown's. Why do you believe you are the right candidate to remain in this race? And what do you say to voters who are concerned about splitting the opposition vote?
Well, the first thing that I would say is I believe in democracy, which means that we have a choice of who we want to lead us forward. To speak to the viability of who I am and the electability of this particular campaign, I go right back to the discussion that we had earlier about the voters themselves. When I've done these town halls, as a matter of fact, the first 5 town halls that I did, Republicans were the first ones to stand up to say, listen, we are tired of this mess, we want another option. That was only about 2 weeks or so after I had my initial conversation with Mr. Bengs, who said he wasn't interested in running for this office. Now, after some things happened with his job or the possibility of his job, then he stepped in. I've been in this since day one for the people of this state, for South Dakotans. This is not an issue for me of splitting the votes. As a matter of fact, this is not about Mike Rounds. This is not about Donald Trump. It's not about Brian Bengs. It's not about me. This is for the people of South Dakota. And so if I am going to say that I am a believer in the strength of our democracy, then that means I need to let democracy play out. And so when it comes time for November, I hope to have earned every single vote out there. I know that there will be some people who don't believe in the policies or the shared values that I have in South Dakota, and they will choose another candidate. And that's okay, because that's what democracy is. And if we are a believer in making this country better, because what I was taught in elementary school is that our Constitution allows us the freedom to make this country better and the freedom to make sure that we're challenging the policies of those, whether they agree with us or not, we have the freedom to do so. And I'm stepping into every freedom that this country affords me the opportunity to do.
Thank you, Julian. I have one final follow-up for you, Julian. In the next FEC filing, when voters look at the reports, do you think that it will give them more or less confidence in your campaign if they feel that fundraising is important as an indicator?
Here's what we've seen across the state is that, again, I have not been asked questions about money whatsoever. However, I understand the importance of raising money in a campaign. Again, since day one, we have said that we are a grassroots organization. And so whether or not I raise $2-3 million or whether or not I just raise $750,000, my dedication is to the people of this state. It's not to making sure that I have the most money in the race. It's making sure that I share the values of the people in South Dakota.
Thank you. Okay, thank you both so much. We've reached the final portion of today's conversation. Each candidate will now have 4 minutes for a closing statement. By coin toss, Brian Bengs will deliver last. We are starting with Julian. I apologize for that, Julian.
No, all good.
These closing statements are an opportunity for each candidate to leave South Dakotans with their final thoughts.
Well, again, thank you to Ngoc for hosting this event. Thank you for turning South Dakota purple as well. And again, thank you to the voters of this state. Listen, I'm not in this to challenge anyone's viability, credibility, or experience. I'm in this to make sure that we have the best representative in DC that we possibly can have. The stakes are way too high to focus on things like big money when the real problem is affordability. We are in a crisis of affordability. Our farmers are struggling. Our families are struggling. Healthcare centers are closing down. Senior living centers are also closing down across the state. I just talked to a farmer who's a generational farmer. He passed his farm down to his son. And they have a real big problem because this individual went to a bank to get a loan to extend his farm, to extend his farm credits. He learned that government programming had cut off the finances for the loan that he originally qualified for. He had to put up his equipment in order to get the loan, only to find out when he got back home he could not farm because he had no equipment. That's the affordability crisis that tackles everyday South Dakotans right now, today. And taking big money out of politics is absolutely important. As I mentioned before, I am dedicated to doing that too. But I am not naive to think that we are living our best lives in South Dakota. We will continue to fight for the state. We will continue to fight for the people in this state. And we will continue to make life better and more affordable for everyone across South Dakota. I thank you for nominating me, and I graciously and humbly step into this role as the proud nominee for U.S. Senate of the Democratic Party. And I look forward to serving you in the United States Senate soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Mr. Bengs, you have 4 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you again, and I do appreciate everybody who's watching, and of course our hosts and organizers for setting this thing up. I wish there was a little bit different desk so I could sit things and the chair was a little bit taller, but I'll get over that. Running for Senate is difficult. I know that. I know that better than anyone because I did it before. I applaud anyone who steps into the arena. So Julian, hats off to you because it is not a pleasant experience overall. It is very wearing on you. But fundamentally, Julian and I have very different objectives for our campaigns. He's running to put Team Blue in a better position to fight Team Red in our dysfunctional system. The coalition that he mentioned was a group of Democratic candidates from across the country, so they're all Team Blue. I'm running because the entire system needs to be changed. It needs to be changed so we move away from the constant partisan warfare to just back delivering practical solutions to the problems regular Americans face. Again, same goal. I'm running because that won't happen. That won't happen unless our senator answers only to regular Americans, not to a national party, not to a party boss, Chuck Schumer, John Thune, and certainly not to big money donors. I won't take orders from Schumer or Thune, and I will act and vote in accord with the South Dakota values, as I've said, that are spelled out in detail on my website. That's it. That's what I'm offering. I'm offering pretty much the same thing Teddy Roosevelt offered during his 1912 presidential campaign, for many of the same reasons. After 32 years of putting party first and regular South Dakotans second, Mike Rounds is offering to keep Team Red in a better position to fight Team Blue. That's his offer. I'm asking you to try something different. An independent voice that answers to nobody but the people of this state, to you. Both Julian and I are fully aware that the number of not Mike Rounds votes are limited. So if the two of us remain on the ballot, he sails to re-election. I look at this race with the analytical eye of a career military officer. We need the strongest possible candidate to go against our opponent. In Julian's first press conference, he said that this campaign isn't about me, it's about securing a future where South Dakota's working families don't get left behind. I agree. I agree, which is why before Julian announced his candidacy, I told him that the most important thing for me was Mike Rounds not going back to DC for a third term. In that conversation, I offered a gentleman's agreement for one of us to withdraw in early 2026 if the other was leading in the objective measures of polling and fundraising. I will reiterate it today. You make a compelling case with objective information, I will write up my withdrawal letter tonight. Last summer, my campaign was struggling. My closest advisor told me if we don't turn it around, we should step out. I was fully prepared to do that, but we have turned it around dramatically. Unfortunately, Julian has consistently refused my offer. Despite every sign to the contrary, he believes he is more competitive because he really, really wants it to be so. If my campaign had more debt than cash, or I was down 25 points in the polls, I wouldn't be here today. Because I actually mean it when I say this campaign isn't about me, and that hope is not an actionable plan. At this point, only Julian can stop more billionaire tax cuts. Only he can stop healthcare funding cuts. Only he can act against the rampant corruption in Washington. He can do all these things by recognizing the reality that at this point, unfortunately, he is not competitive. I actually wish that he would be, because then I would not feel compelled to do this. As your next senator, I and the other members of the independent conference will freely work across the aisle, call balls and strikes honestly, and I will put regular South Dakotans first every time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Julian. And thank you both for your willingness to participate in what we hope is the first of many respectful and substantive political conversations in South Dakota. I'd also like to thank everyone who submitted questions and followed along with this event. While we couldn't ask every question, your input helped shape today's discussion. Our hope is that tonight's conversation has given South Dakotans a better understanding of both candidates and the choices before them. The future of our state depends on informed, engaged citizens. We encourage everyone watching to continue learning about the candidates, participate in the political process, and most importantly, make your voice heard at the ballot box. On behalf of Turn South Dakota Purple, thank you for watching.